Al?
Hey, how are you?
Are you Deeps? Oh, you are.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Blake Damon here, and today we're going to go through some patch notes. These patch notes were released on the 12th of March 2024. There is a lot to go through, so let's just get straight to it. If you're a fan of playing Hero Mastery, there is a new mode. Hero Mastery Gauntlet is a new co-op mode where players work together to protect towers from enemy bots, collect energy, and buy powerful upgrades to survive all 10 rounds. Focus your skills to earn high scores and compete on the leaderboards. Are you ready to enter the Gauntlet? So the Gauntlet is a mode where teams up to 3 aim to survive 10 rounds with randomized upgrades, bots, and tower targets. There are 4 difficulty levels, with the highest being Legendary. New bots, including elite training bots, add to the challenge, and players can practice in AI mode, but scores aren't recorded in this mode. And now for the main event, hero updates. So they've updated the projectile size, the global projectile size modifier for travel time projectiles with a speed greater than 50 meters per second reduced from 0.1 to 0.075 meters. I'm not entirely sure which hero this affects. They don't have a list or anything, but I'm guessing maybe a Widow or Scoped Ashe and Anna. Probably Cassidy's in there too. So they're doing this apparently because when people thought they were clicking on heads, people were actually hitting the enemy's chest because of the recent update where they just made everyone bigger. And this is somehow supposed to help with that. Now there's an update to the role passive. Tanks and supports can now rejoice because healing reduction applied by the damage roll passive has now been lowered from 20% to 15%. The developer comments read, "The damage roll passive reduces the potency of in-combat healing and helps equalize the effectiveness between burst and damage over time. Nevertheless, we are going to experiment with a lower value to relieve some of the pressure on tank and support rolls. We'll be keeping a close eye on this change as we want the healing reduction to still be noticeable." As a support main, I really don't like the damage roll passive at all. I think I would have preferred the reduction to be 10%, but I'll settle for 15% as a compromise. Regardless, it should make supporting my team just a little bit easier. There's also a little quality of life update. There's now going to be a little UI element above your own health bar, and that'll show some health status effects like anti-heals, amplified healing, or reduced healing. But this is all on your own screen. So I'm wondering whether or not this information will be available for the rest of your team to see, because as a support main, I feel like that would be a really nice thing to have. I'd especially like to see who has the reduced healing debuff on them, just so that I can manage my resources accordingly. And now onto the tank updates. And first up we have Doomfist, whose Meteor Strike damage has now been increased from a minimum damage of 15 to 50. The director's take, which I went through in my previous video, had some few things to say about this. I'll leave a link to that video at the end of this one if you'd like to check it out. And next we have Mauga, who's been buffed. The developer comments read, "We are changing Cardiac Overdrive to make it more forgiving when used for yourself, especially when Mauga is low health." So although they did reduce the duration of Cardiac Overdrive from 5 to 4 seconds, they did reduce the cooldown from 12 seconds to 10 seconds, and it now fills his passive overhealth by 100. So along with his Berserker passive, where he can get a maximum of 150 overhealth, does that mean that he can now get a total of 250 overhealth now? And although I do love Mauga, he's one of my favorite tanks to play, I certainly hope this isn't the case because that just feels OP. And along with the Cardiac Overdrive buff, they've also buffed his Overrun. The stomp damage of that has now been increased from 45 to 60. Moving on to Orisa, whose ult has now been buffed. The charge rate of Terra Surge for the first 2.5 seconds has now been increased by 25%. In short, she's going to do more damage at the beginning of her ult if she decides to release her ult early. Next we have Ramacha, who has also gotten a buff. His Ravenous Vortex now has an increased total damage from 45 to 70. And the cooldown has been decreased from 12 to 11 seconds. And now we have Reinhardt, whose armor has been increased from 275 to 300. So against most heroes, that's an increase of 50 HP. And his fire strike damage has been increased from 100 to 120. And finally, we have Roadhog. His developer comments read, "We're improving the consistency of the hook combo. Enemies are pulled closer to Roadhog and aren't launched as high when Pigpen activates, making the scrap gun follow-up shot more consistent. So now when you're hooked, you're now pulled 3 meters away from Roadhog as opposed to 4, and the vertical knockback of Pigpen on activation has now been decreased by 43%. And now moving on to the damage roll heroes, we have a bit of a nerf for Hanzo. His developer comments read, "We're reverting the previous change to the base projectile size of Hanzo's arrows and replacing it with the general global reduction, which affects all travel time projectiles with a speed greater than 50 meters per second, resulting in Hanzo's arrow projectile staying the same size as before this patch." So his base projectile size has increased from 0.075 to 0.1 meters. The total projectile size, when combined with the general hero change, is still 0.175 meters. So basically he's still firing tree trunks at our faces, but sometimes they might miss because they might be hitting our chest mass instead. So I guess that's a silver lining. And next we have Mei. Her endothermic blast ammo has been increased from 120 to 140, and her cryo freeze healing has now been increased from 50 to 62.5. And next we have a buff for Reaper. His Death Blossom damage has been increased from 170 damage per second to 185, and his ultimate cost has been decreased by 12%. And Sombra's developer comments reads, "Virus deals critical impact damage when it hits hacked targets, and this change makes using it as a follow-up more compelling. The translocator now destroys breakable objects, preventing Sombra from teleporting a shorter distance than expected. So now Virus impact damage has been increased from 10 to 25, which means you'll be dealing 50 impact damage if the target is hacked. Translocator now destroys breakables while in flight. I guess this is something like fences or furniture that might get in the way when you throw your translocator. And her EMP ultimate cost has been reduced by 8%. Moving on to Symmetra. Her primary fire damage from her photon projector has been increased from 60 damage per second to 65, scaling with each stage. The new maximum damage per second is now 195. Her turrets have been buffed, with their health increased from 30 to 50, and the damage per second increased from 25 to 30. And the teleporter has also been buffed, with its health increased from 50 to 100, and its shield increased from 150 to 200. And finally, in the damage roll, we have Torbjorn. His turret damage has been increased from 11 to 13. And now moving on to the supports, we have Anna, whose biotic grenade explosion damage and healing has been increased from 60 to 90. A wonderful little buff there for Anna. Baptiste has a little bit of a nerf. His immortality field minimum health threshold has been decreased from 25% to 20%. And next we have Brigida's buffs. Her repair pack cooldown has been reduced from 6 to 5 seconds, and the cost of her ult has been reduced by 8%. Ilari's developer comments reads, "We are adjusting the firing cadence of the solar rifle, making it more responsive to use and increasing the damage per second, but not the burst damage." So her solar rifle's primary fire recovery time has been reduced from 0.3 to 0.2 seconds, which means now she'll be able to fire a fractionally bit more often. And the solar rifle's maximum charge time has been reduced from 0.7 to 0.65 seconds. And lastly, we have Lifeweaver. His developer comments reads, "We're increasing the burst potential of the Healing Blossom to reinforce Lifeweaver's role as a high healing throughput support. The heal per second is roughly the same as before, but individual heal blossoms can be charged further. So in order to achieve this, they've increased the maximum healing amount his healing blossoms can do from 70 to 80, and then increased the maximum charge time from 1 to 1.15 seconds. And that's the majority of the patch notes. If you'd like to check out the rest of it, I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. Otherwise, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, and subscribe if you haven't already.